Don't quit on me now. The comm line crackled to life. Incoming ship on approach, Carter. And it's a big one. He glanced at the monitor, his eyes narrowing as he took in the size of the vessel. There was nothing familiar about its structure, and the strange curves and almost organic hull gave it an otherworldly quality. But what concerned him most were the scorch marks and damage visible even from the station. Whoever was on that ship had seen battle, and they were heading straight for his outpost. "Is it ours?" he asked, tightening his grip on the comm line receiver. "Negative," came the reply. "It's alien, Xylon by the looks of it." Alex's mind raced. The Xylon were one of the few species humans had encountered in recent years. Intelligent, technologically advanced, and, most importantly, standoffish. They didn't mix with humans and certainly didn't rely on them for help. And yet, here was an alien ship, heavily damaged and now docking at his outpost, practically on his doorstep. As the ship maneuvered into the docking bay with a groan of strained metal, Alex felt a shiver of excitement laced with nerves. He'd seen alien tech in schematics and training videos, but working on it, that was something else. But there was no time to overthink. This was happening whether he was ready or not. The airlock hissed, and Alex stood at attention, waiting for the Zealand to step out. When they did, his jaw nearly hit the floor. The figure that emerged was tall, regal, and imposing, standing a full foot taller than him with a confidence that only a leader could carry. Her iridescent skin shimmered, shifting from deep purple to emerald as she moved, and her eyes held an intensity that left no room for doubt. This was a queen, Queen Mara of the Xylon Empire. "You," her voice was rich and commanding, echoing in the metallic hall of the outpost. "Are you the one in charge here?" Alex swallowed, steeling himself. "I guess you could say that." "Alex Carter, chief engineer." She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "This station is primitive, but we have no other choice. My ship requires immediate repairs, and our technology, well, it is beyond what you would understand." Her tone was blunt, almost dismissive, as though her presence was a gift to him, not the other way around. Alex felt a spark of irritation, but he quickly swallowed it down. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and no amount of alien arrogance would get in the way of that. "I'll do what I can, Your, Majesty." She gave a slight nod, and he detected a hint of amusement in her gaze, as if she were testing him, waiting to see if he would falter. But Alex met her stare with quiet confidence, unwilling to back down. "Very well, human, follow me." He followed her into the ship, his eyes widening as he took in the strange and beautiful architecture. The corridors were softly lit by bioluminescent panels, and the walls seemed to pulse with a faint rhythm, like the ship was alive. Organic tendrils coiled along the ceilings, feeding into various systems and consoles, each of which glowed with a strange, vibrant light. He'd never seen anything like it, and despite himself, he couldn't help but whisper, "Incredible." Queen Mara glanced at him over her shoulder, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Our ships are an extension of ourselves. They are alive in ways that human machines are not." Her tone softened for a moment, and Alex sensed a deep pride there. But just as quickly, the steel returned to her voice. "But it has been gravely damaged. We encountered enemies who wield weapons unlike any we have seen, and our ship barely escaped. My people are counting on me to return." Alex nodded, understanding more than she realized. He might be a human mechanic, but he knew the pressure of responsibility and the weight of lives depending on you. "I'll give it everything I've got, Queen Mara. Let's get started." The Queen guided him to the ship's engine core, an awe-inspiring sight, a sphere of light suspended by woven tendrils of metal and organic material, pulsing in time with the ship's life force. As he examined the systems, Alex's mind buzzed with both fascination and frustration. Every piece of Xylon tech he touched felt strange, more intuitive than any machine he'd ever worked on. Yet, it was foreign, defying his understanding of mechanics and forcing him to improvise with every turn of the wrench. As he worked, he became acutely aware of Queen Mara's watchful gaze. She stood nearby, arms folded, her eyes like silver blades as she observed him. Skeptical yet curious, he knew she didn't believe he could fix her ship, that she saw him as little more than a desperate last resort. But Alex had something to prove, not just to her, but to himself. This was his moment, a chance to show what he was capable of, and he was determined not to let it slip away. Finally, after what felt like hours, he managed to make some headway. The core stabilized slightly, emitting a brighter glow as the damaged connections began to respond. Alex exhaled, allowing himself a small smile. "Impressive," Queen Mara murmured, her tone reluctant. "For a human." Alex grinned. "Just a piece of junk to you, right?" She raised an eyebrow, and for the first time he thought he saw a hint of respect. Perhaps I underestimated you, but do not let it go to your head, human. There is much left to be done." Her words were stern, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that, in her own way, she was acknowledging him. In that moment, they stood not just as alien queen and human mechanic, but as two people facing a common challenge, bound by their shared will to overcome. As they turned back to the task at hand, Alex felt a surge of confidence. He might be a nobody in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but right here, right now, he was exactly where he was supposed to be, and he wasn't about to let this opportunity pass him by. As Alex continued his work on the ship's core, the labyrinthine layers of Xylon technology began to unfold before him, revealing a system both breathtaking and baffling. Every component seemed connected to an organic network that pulsed with energy, its design alien yet oddly harmonious. It was as if the ship was more than just a machine, a living entity that responded to the presence of its crew, especially Queen Mara. For hours, Alex wrestled with the unfamiliar circuitry, tracing the pulsing tendrils that ran from the core to various other parts of the ship. With each new section he examined, he found himself in awe of the Xylons' engineering. Their technology was far beyond human capability, more intuitive than mechanical. It was as if their ships were grown rather than built, their systems breathing and reacting to his touch. He felt like an archaeologist uncovering relics of an ancient civilization, each discovery both thrilling and humbling. But alongside his fascination grew a daunting awareness of the challenges before him. Many of the ship's systems were damaged, and the repairs required precision and understanding that he simply didn't have. And yet, Queen Mara seemed to sense his dedication. She moved beside him, silently observing, her imposing figure casting a shadow over him as he worked. "Your people are interesting," she said finally, her voice breaking the silence. "You approach this technology with such confidence, as though you understand it. But I know you do not." Alex chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I may not understand it, but that's never stopped me before." He glanced up at her, flashing a grin. "Humans are resourceful. We learn on the go." Queen Mara's silver eyes softened, just for a moment. "Perhaps there is more to your species than I thought." She hesitated, her gaze drifting to the flickering lights within the core. "Our technology is not just a tool, it is an extension of ourselves. This ship is a part of me, connected to my thoughts and my life force. We are bound." Her words gave Alex pause. He looked at her, understanding the depth of her connection to the vessel. This wasn't just a ship to her, it was part of who she was, a piece of her own essence that she was trusting him to mend. "I'll do my best to honor that connection," he said softly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on him anew. He turned back to the core, redoubling his efforts. After hours of work, he managed to stabilize some of the ship's basic systems, and he began making slow but steady progress. With every successful repair, he grew more attuned to the organic circuitry, learning to sense the energy flow and respond to its subtle cues. Queen Mara watched him closely, and although her expression remained impassive, he thought he detected a glimmer of approval in her gaze. "You're getting the hang of it," she said quietly, almost grudgingly. "Not all of your kind would adapt so quickly." Alex shrugged, downplaying the compliment. "I've been fixing things since I could hold a wrench. Just never thought I'd be fixing a living spaceship." She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "You are different, Alex Carter. Your persistence, it is admirable. But tell me, why do you do this? Why risk so much for those you do not know?" He paused, considering her question. "I don't know, really," he admitted. "I guess it's just who I am. I see something broken, and I have this urge to fix it, to make it whole again. And maybe," he hesitated, his gaze flicking toward her, "maybe it's because you needed help, and I couldn't walk away." A shadow of surprise crossed her face, and she looked away, as though unsure how to respond. In that moment, the formidable Queen Mara seemed almost vulnerable, and Alex felt a strange kinship with her, a bond forged not by race or background, but by the shared resolve to keep fighting against all odds. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden warning beep from the control panel. Alex quickly scanned the readouts, his heart sinking. A power fluctuation had triggered a surge, sending critical systems into disarray. He worked frantically to stabilize the systems, his hands moving with practiced speed as he rerouted energy and recalibrated circuits. But the damage was extensive, and the ship's life support systems began to fail, triggering alarms throughout the vessel. Queen Mara's expression hardened as she stepped closer to him, her presence a steadying force. "Can you fix it?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with urgency. I think so, but I'll need your help." he replied, glancing up at her. There's a section of the core that's not responding. It seems to react to your presence, maybe because of the connection you mentioned. Can you try focusing your energy on it? She nodded, closing her eyes and placing her hand on a pulsating console. Her features tightened in concentration, and slowly the core began to stabilize, its glow intensifying as the energy flow became steady. Alex marveled at the sight. It was like watching a conductor guiding an orchestra, her will alone bringing the ship's systems back into harmony. He worked alongside her, adjusting the circuits to accommodate the surge of power. Together, they managed to bring the life support systems back online, and the alarms faded into silence. When it was done, they both exhaled, a shared sense of relief filling the air. Alex glanced at her, a new respect in his gaze. That was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. She opened her eyes, her expression softening. You have done well, Alex Carter. Perhaps there is hope for your kind after all. He smiled, feeling a surge of pride. I'm starting to think there's a lot we can learn from each other. As they resumed their work, he found himself stealing glances at her, marveling at the fierce strength beneath her composed exterior. She was a leader, yes, but there was something deeper, a vulnerability she kept hidden, a weight she bore alone. And in the quiet moments between repairs, he sensed a growing connection between them, a bond forged in the crucible of survival and mutual respect. They worked side by side, human and Zelan, each bringing their unique strengths to bear on the task before them. And as they labored to restore the ship, Alex felt a shift within himself, a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing. By the time they finished the day's work, they had managed to repair several critical systems, bringing the ship closer to full functionality. As they stepped back, surveying their progress, Queen Mara turned to him, her expression unreadable. You have done much for us, she said quietly, more than I expected. Perhaps more than I deserved. He shook his head. You don't owe me anything, Your Majesty. I'm just doing what I can. She gave him a searching look, as though trying to see into his very soul. And yet, you ask for nothing in return. Alex met her gaze, unflinching. Sometimes, helping someone is its own reward. For a moment they stood in silence, two beings from different worlds bound by the same unspoken understanding. And in that moment, Alex knew that his life had changed irrevocably, that he was no longer just a mechanic on an isolated outpost. He was a part of something far greater, a journey that was only just beginning. The harbinger of dawn drifted in silence, a dark speck in the vastness of space as Alex worked tirelessly, pushing his limits to repair the damage that still threatened the ship. Queen Mara was a constant presence, her keen eyes watching his every move as if weighing his very soul. Each adjustment, each repair brought them closer to full functionality, yet something lingered, a sense of impending danger that neither of them could ignore. After hours of meticulous work, Alex paused, glancing at the control panel with a frown. There was still an issue he couldn't pinpoint, a strange interference running through the ship's communication systems, one that felt almost artificial. Mara, he began, glancing over his shoulder. This interference in the comms, it's like a pulse. Something I can't quite explain. Have you ever seen anything like this? Her expression darkened, and she looked away, an edge of tension tightening her posture. Yes, she replied, her voice low. This is a signature we have come to fear. It means they are near. The Vorth. Alex felt a chill run through him. He had heard rumors of the Vorth, whispers of a race that operated on the fringes of known space, leaving destruction in their wake. Tales of their raids on unprotected worlds and their unyielding pursuit of dominance had spread like ghost stories in the darker corners of interstellar society. So, they're after you? Alex asked, piecing together what he could. This interference, it's a tracking signal, isn't it? Mara nodded, her silver eyes narrowing. Yes. The Vorth use this pulse to track their prey. They hunt us considering the Zelan as rivals, beings whose existence they see as a threat to their control. Our technology, our culture, everything we are defies their strict doctrine of superiority. As the weight of her words settled over him, Alex clenched his fists. Then we can't just wait around. If they're coming, we need to be ready. Her gaze softened, and a flicker of respect crossed her features. You speak as if you have faced these creatures yourself. He shook his head, meeting her gaze with determination. I haven't, but I've learned that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. For a moment, silence hung between them, and in that quiet, Alex saw a side of her that went beyond her stoic exterior, a leader carrying the weight of her people's survival, the vulnerability that came with it. Breaking the silence, Myra stepped closer, her voice taking on a grave tone. There's something you need to understand. Our ship's technology is more than just complex mechanics. It's designed to resist their invasive technology. But even our best defenses may not withstand a direct assault. The implications were clear, and Alex felt a weight settle over him. They were outnumbered, and he had no idea how to counter a force as fearsome as the Vorth. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to walk away from the Queen and her people. I'm not giving up, he said firmly. If we can't outrun them, then we'll have to outsmart them. Tell me everything you know about their methods. Maybe there's a way we can disrupt their signal. Buy ourselves some time. Myra's gaze softened further, and for a moment her regal demeanor gave way to a quiet gratitude. Your resilience is unexpected. Very well, I will tell you what I can. Over the next few hours they worked together, Myra detailing the Vorth's methods while Alex formulated a plan to counter the threat. As he delved deeper into the complexities of Xenon technology, a sense of urgency fueled his actions. Every piece of equipment, every wire and circuit held significance, but even the smallest misstep could spell disaster. Their work was interrupted by a sudden tremor that shook the ship, followed by the blaring of proximity alarms. Alex's eyes widened as he looked at the console, which displayed a series of red alerts. They're here, Myra said, her voice cold and calm, though her fists clenched at her sides. Their ships have breached our defense perimeter. Alex's heart raced as he scanned the data. We're not ready for a full-on attack. The systems are still stabilizing, and we don't have full power to the shields. She turned to him, her gaze steely. Then we have no choice but to fight. Our only hope lies in using what we have to drive them off. Determination hardened Alex's resolve as he turned to the main controls. He wasn't a warrior, but he knew the ship better than anyone else aboard. If he could redirect power to the critical systems, they might stand a chance. Take command of the defense systems, he said, his voice firm. I'll work on boosting the shields and redirecting energy to weapons. We'll make them regret coming here. Myra's gaze held his for a beat before she nodded, her authority as a queen evident in her every movement. As she moved to her station, Alex threw himself into the work, his hands flying over the controls. He rerouted power from secondary systems, giving every last ounce of energy to the shields and weapons. The ship jolted again as enemy fire pounded against the hull, but the shields held, albeit barely. Myra's calm, commanding voice filled the bridge as she issued orders, coordinating the defense with a precision that could only come from years of leadership. Alex, they're focusing on our engines, she called out. If they disable us, it's over. He gritted his teeth, frantically typing in commands to reinforce the weakened areas. Working on it. Just keep them off us for a little longer. Sweat beaded on his brow as he strained to keep up, his mind racing with calculations. The odds were against them, but he was determined not to let her down. Suddenly, a thought struck him, a risky maneuver that could potentially disrupt the Vorth ships. Myra, I have an idea. If we overload the engine core momentarily, it might create an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disable their tracking systems. It'll be risky, but it could buy us time to make repairs. Her eyes narrowed, calculating the risks. If you think it will work, then do it, but we will need to time it perfectly. With a nod, Alex set to work, preparing the systems for the overload. He synchronized with Myra's commands, their movements harmonizing as they brought the ship to the brink of its capabilities. Finally, everything was in place. Alex glanced over at Myra, his heart pounding. Ready? She nodded, her expression fierce. Do it. He activated the pulse, and the ship's core surged, sending a powerful wave through space. The lights flickered, and the entire vessel groaned under the strain. But the plan worked. The Vorth ships faltered, their tracking systems momentarily disrupted. Now's our chance, Myra shouted. Take evasive maneuvers. As the Harbinger veered away, Alex rerouted power to the engines, driving the ship to maximum speed. Behind them, the Vorth ships struggled to recover, their sensors still scrambled from the pulse. In the tense silence that followed, Alex exhaled a shaky breath, the weight of what they had just accomplished settling over him. He glanced at Myra, her gaze filled with an intensity that went beyond mere gratitude. You saved us, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Without you, we would have fallen to them. Alex smiled, though he felt the exhaustion creeping in. Couldn't have done it without you. Guess we make a pretty good team. As they drifted in the safety of the darkness, a new understanding blossomed between them. They were no longer just allies, but something more. A bond forged in the crucible of battle and tempered by the trust they had placed in each other. In that quiet moment, they both knew that the real journey had only just begun. The Harbinger of Dawn floated in the calm expanse of space, away from the immediate threat of the Vorth. The crew took a collective breath, savoring the temporary respite. But for Alex and Queen Mara, the battle was far from over. They still had a ship to repair, systems to stabilize, and an uncertain future awaiting them. As Alex checked the diagnostics, he noticed Mara watching him, her gaze a mixture of curiosity and something he couldn't quite decipher. Her presence was calming yet intense, a reminder of the growing trust and unspoken bond between them. "You surprise me, Alex," Mara said, breaking the silence. "Your determination, your ingenuity, it's unlike anything I have encountered." He shrugged, feeling a bit sheepish under her intense gaze. "Guess I'm just stubborn. Growing up, my dad always said that a person can either fix their problems or let them win. I chose to fight back. Maybe that's why I became a mechanic. There's something satisfying about bringing order to chaos." Mara's lips curved into a slight smile, one that seemed both regal and genuine. "I can see that. But there's more to you than that, isn't there? You stepped into a conflict you knew nothing about, and now you're risking everything for beings you hardly know." Alex hesitated, caught off guard by her insight. It was true. Something about this mission had awakened a drive in him, a purpose beyond anything he'd ever known, but he hadn't figured out why himself. "I don't know," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. Maybe I just felt like it was the right thing to do, or maybe I'm tired of fixing things that don't matter. This mission, helping you, defending your people, it feels like it matters." Mara nodded, her gaze softening. "Then, for whatever reason, I am grateful. You've become more than an ally, Alex. To me, and to my people." Her words hung in the air, filling the silence with a weight he hadn't anticipated. There was something else she wasn't saying, something deeper she struggled to express. He could see it in her eyes, the weight of leadership, the burden of responsibility, and the uncertainty of entrusting her life and her people's future to a stranger. Breaking the moment, she turned to a control panel, activating a projection. A star map appeared, illuminating the room with points of light. At the center was an intricate constellation Alex hadn't seen before. "This is our destination," Mara said, pointing to a distant star marked in gold. "Our home world lies here, but there's more than just our survival at stake. The Vorth pursue us because they believe our technology poses a threat to their dominance. They see our advancements as an affront to their rigid hierarchy." He studied the map, noting the strategic position of her planet within the galaxy. "So, they're not just hunting you for revenge. They're trying to erase what your people stand for: freedom, independence." "Exactly," she said, her expression darkening. "To them, we are symbols of defiance, a beacon of resistance. They will stop at nothing to see us extinguished." As he absorbed her words, the enormity of their mission became clear. This wasn't just about saving her ship or outmaneuvering a few enemy vessels. They were fighting against an ideology that threatened everything her people represented. "We can't let them win," he said, the determination in his voice surprising even him. "Whatever it takes, we'll make sure they don't get their way." Mara's gaze softened again, a rare vulnerability showing in her silver eyes. "Thank you, Alex. I can't express how much your words mean, but there's something you need to understand. This path we're on, it may lead to more danger than either of us can imagine." "Wouldn't be the first time I've taken a leap into the unknown," he replied with a grin, hoping to lighten the tension. "Besides, I don't think I could walk away even if I wanted to." Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. This was no longer just a mission. It was a commitment, a promise that transcended the unspoken barriers between them. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, breaking the moment. Alex checked the controls, frowning at the fluctuating power readings. "Looks like we're not out of the woods yet. The engines are still running hot, and the power core is unstable. We'll need to reroute some systems to avoid another shutdown." Mara nodded, all business again as she moved to assist. They worked side by side, moving through the ship's corridors and adjusting various systems to stabilize the core. Despite the gravity of the situation, there was an ease between them, a wordless rhythm that made their work seamless. After a grueling hour of adjustments and recalibrations, the core finally stabilized, the readings leveling out to a safer range. Alex wiped the sweat from his brow, his muscles aching but his spirit invigorated. "Not bad for a day's work," he said with a grin, meeting Mara's eyes. "I'd say we've got a fighting chance now." She returned his smile, a hint of pride in her expression. "Indeed, with each step, we are closer to our goal. Your resilience continues to astonish me, Alex." He shrugged, though her words warmed him in a way he hadn't expected. "Guess I just don't know when to quit." They stood in silence, the hum of the ship's engines filling the space between them. For a moment it felt as if the universe had paused, the vastness of space folding around them, cocooning them in a quiet intimacy. Finally, Myra broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have not allowed myself to trust in a long time. Trust is a vulnerability, a risk, but you have shown me that it can also be a strength." Alex felt a lump rise in his throat as he listened to her words. He wanted to say something, to let her know that she wasn't alone in this fight, that he would stand by her no matter what, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he reached out, his hand brushing against hers. She didn't pull away, and for a moment, they stood there, hand in hand, the weight of their journey easing in the simple connection. But before they could fully grasp the significance of the moment, an alert blared through the corridor, jolting them back to reality. Myra's expression shifted immediately, her regal composure snapping back into place. "An incoming transmission," she said, her voice laced with urgency. "It's from the Vorth." The tension in the air thickened as they made their way to the communication room, their previous connection slipping into the background as they prepared for the unknown. When the screen flickered to life, they were met with the menacing visage of a Vorth commander, his skin pale and his eyes cold. His gaze swept over them both, lingering on Myra with a contemptuous sneer. "Queen Myra," he drawled, his voice oozing disdain. "Did you think you could escape us so easily? The Vorth will not tolerate the existence of your kind, nor your traitorous alliances." Myra stood tall, her voice steady as steel. "You may hunt us, but you will not break us. We will continue to stand against your tyranny, no matter the cost." The commander's lip curled, his gaze shifting to Alex. "And you, human, do you understand the price of siding with such defiance? You are meddling in affairs beyond your comprehension." Alex stepped forward, meeting the commander's gaze without flinching. "Maybe I am, but I know this much. You're afraid of what her people represent, and that's reason enough for me to fight." The commander's eyes narrowed, his tone laced with venom. "Then you shall face the consequences." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Alex turned to Myra, his resolve unwavering. "Looks like we've got ourselves a war." She nodded, her gaze fierce with determination. "And we will fight it together." With their path set and their fates intertwined, they prepared for the final battle that would determine the future of her people, the fate of their alliance and the legacy of their bond. The harbinger of dawn cruised steadily through the darkness, its repaired systems humming in harmony, ready for the last fight. The Vorth, relentless and unforgiving, closed in, their ships dotting the black expanse like predators scenting blood. Alex, standing beside Queen Myra on the bridge, felt the weight of every decision they'd made leading to this moment. This battle would decide the fate of her people, and perhaps of their bond. Myra's gaze swept across the bridge, lingering on each of her crew members with a silent, resolute strength. Her presence, regal and fierce, steadied everyone, and Alex felt a swell of admiration for the woman who had become his commander and friend. She glanced at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and the unspoken promise of their alliance. "Our people are not warriors, Alex," Myra said, her voice softened with the burden of leadership. "But today, we fight for more than survival. We fight for freedom, and we fight to stand on our own terms." Alex nodded, his determination hardening. "Then let's give them a battle they'll never forget." As the Vorth fleet drew closer, Alex's mind raced with the strategy they had hastily devised. They didn't have the firepower or numbers to win through brute force, but Myra's knowledge of their enemy's weaknesses, combined with his mechanical ingenuity, gave them a chance. They had repurposed part of the ship's core to emit an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt the Vorth's shield systems. However, it would leave the Harbinger vulnerable for a crucial moment, forcing them to time it perfectly. Myra turned to her second-in-command, who was manning the ship's primary weapons console. "When the pulse is activated, unleash everything we have on their command ship. Without it, they'll be in chaos." He nodded, his face tense but resolved. Every crew member on the bridge knew what was at stake. "Prepare for incoming fire," Myra commanded, her voice sharp with authority. The Vorth ships loomed ominously on the view screen, each vessel bristling with weapons trained on the Harbinger. Alex could feel the tension rising with each heartbeat. He swallowed, his hands steady on the console as he watched the readings from their pulse device. It had to be timed perfectly. A single miscalculation would leave them defenseless. As the enemy's lead ship came into range, Maera gave the order. Activate the pulse. Alex hit the switch, and the Harbinger shuddered as the pulse shot out, an invisible shockwave of energy rippling toward the Vorth fleet. For a split second, everything went dark. The power diverted from their shields left them exposed. Alex held his breath, his heart pounding as the pulse struck the enemy ships. The Vorth vessels wavered, their shield systems flickering and collapsing. Maera's second-in-command seized the opportunity, unleashing a torrent of firepower directly at the lead ship. Explosions erupted across its hull, ripping through the command vessel and triggering a chain reaction in the surrounding ships. One by one, they faltered, thrown into disarray as their defensive formations crumbled. A cheer rose from the crew as the first of the Vorth ships went down, a fiery wreck disappearing into the void. Alex felt a rush of exhilaration, but he knew the battle was far from over. The remaining Vorth forces, though weakened, were regrouping, and they still outnumbered the Harbinger by a dangerous margin. They're rallying, Maera noted grimly. They won't fall so easily. Suddenly, a proximity alert blared across the bridge. The Vorth flagship, a massive, menacing vessel with armored plating and weapons bristling along its hull, was charging directly at them. Its intent was clear. It was going to crush the Harbinger in a full frontal assault. Evasive maneuvers, Maera commanded, gripping the edge of her console as the ship veered sharply to the side. The Harbinger narrowly dodged the Vorth flagship's first strike, but another blast from its cannons rocked the ship, sending Alex tumbling to the deck. He scrambled back to his feet, his gaze fixed on the damaged control panel. They couldn't keep this up much longer. "Captain," he shouted over the commotion, "we're running out of options. If we can get close enough, I could disable their engines, maybe even their weapons, but we'd have to board the flagship." Maera looked at him, a mixture of resolve and apprehension in her gaze. She knew the risks, but it was their best, and perhaps only, chance. She nodded. "Gather a strike team. We'll create a diversion to buy you some time." Without another word, Alex raced to the armory, gathering the few crew members brave enough to follow him into the heart of the enemy ship. Clad in reinforced suits and armed with pulse rifles, they assembled at the docking hatch, tension thick in the air. "Everyone ready?" Alex asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The team nodded, their faces set with determination. They knew what was at stake and were ready to follow him into the unknown. Maera's voice came through the comms. "We're initiating the diversion. Brace yourselves and be swift." With that, the Harbinger launched a concentrated attack on the Vorth flagship, drawing its attention and leaving a narrow window for Alex's team to board. As the hatch opened, they leaped across the void, landing in the Vorth docking bay with a bone-jarring thud. Inside, the halls of the flagship were eerily silent, a stark contrast to the chaos of the battlefield outside. Alex and his team moved quickly, navigating the alien architecture and following his readings toward the engine room. They encountered resistance as Vorth soldiers appeared, their towering forms blocking the corridor. A firefight ensued, the narrow passage filling with the blinding flashes of plasma fire. Alex gritted his teeth, ducking behind a console as bolts of energy whizzed past. His team pushed forward, their pulse rifles humming as they returned fire, holding the Vorth at bay. Finally, they reached the engine room, a massive chamber pulsating with the eerie green glow of the Vorth's power core. Alex could feel the heat radiating from the core, and the oppressive hum of energy filled the air. "Guard the entrance," he instructed the others. "I'll need a few minutes to override the controls." As his team held off the Vorth soldiers, Alex approached the control panel, his hands moving swiftly over the unfamiliar interface. He bypassed the primary systems, rerouting the power from the flagship's engines and weapons, effectively crippling its offensive capabilities. But just as he initiated the shutdown, a Vorth officer lunged at him, catching him off guard. They grappled, the officer's inhuman strength nearly overwhelming him. Alex fought back with every ounce of his strength, finally managing to activate his pulse rifle and fire point blank. The officer collapsed, leaving Alex breathless but victorious. With the systems disabled, he called out to his team, "Let's go. We're done here." They raced back through the corridors, escaping into the docking bay just as the flagship's power flickered and died. Outside, the Harbinger swooped in, its docking hatch opening to receive them as they made the leap back to safety. On the bridge, Maera greeted them with a look of profound relief and respect. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "The flagship is powerless." The Vorth fleet, thrown into disarray by the loss of their flagship, began to retreat, their vessels scattering into the stars. A collective cheer erupted from the Harbinger's crew as they realized they had won. Alex, standing beside Mara, felt a surge of triumph and pride. They had not only survived, but had turned the tide against an enemy determined to erase her people from existence. Mara turned to him, her gaze filled with unspoken gratitude. "Alex," she said softly, "I owe you more than I can ever repay. You have given us hope." He smiled, reaching out to clasp her hand. "You don't owe me anything, Mara. We fought this battle together." As the Harbinger sailed through the calm stars, a sense of peace settled over the ship. The journey had changed them both, forging a bond neither had expected but both knew would endure. In the vastness of space, under the light of distant stars, they set a course for home, carrying with them a story of resilience, courage, and an alliance that would shape the future of the galaxy.